Hello and welcome to the Ahead of the Game podcast. I'm your host, James Oxford, and today I've got Alex West and Chris Byler with me to discuss which NBA team we think could best fit each of the prospects we are looking at come this year's draft. Is this conversation early? Probably, but that's why we are ahead of the game here. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and move on to Ace Bailey. All right, Alex, we're going to kick it to you for Ace first. Tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah, I really like Ace Bailey. I think the thing that's going to jump off the page, as soon as you watch him, as soon as you watch tape, you're going to go, man, this guy's a freak athlete. His strength, his ability to jump, he's incredibly smooth as a jumper. That is all just this really phenomenal thing that we get sucked into every year. And I don't mean like sucked into like he's not as good as advertised. It just is sexy. As soon as you see it, you're like, man, that dude looks like an NBA player. And I think that's the big Ace Bailey draw is the body, the physicality, the strength, the length, all of that is there in spades. And then you get to the other side and you go, okay, well, there's a lot of shot making questions. He has some shots that he really likes to get to that are not good shots. And I think that's really what the question that you get into with Bailey is like, what's going to happen this year at Rutgers? Rutgers is not a program that has traditionally churned out like high level NBA players. It's a question of what is it going to look like. He's playing with Dylan Harper. What are they going to try to get him into? And like, it's a little bit of the Ron Holland thing writ small is like, how much of a box are they going to put Ace Bailey in to make him a productive player? And I think really that's the big question for him is what is his box where he can do all the really awesome Ace Bailey things, but then he can also be limited to shot selection and his ability to impact the game with the ball in his hands and how, one of my concerns, and we can talk about this with you guys, is the ball gets a little stuckish. Like when it comes to him and just kind of ends up there. And we know this possession's about to end because Ace Bailey's got the ball. And so I really want to see as we get into the year and as it starts to unpack, like what's going to happen. And this is an awesome, awesome thing for Rutgers playing this Big Ten schedule. We're going to get to see a ton of chances for both of these guys to play against high level competition, to see weird junk defenses, to see schemes get thrown at them specifically. And so I think of the guys that we're talking about, I think these two guys are going to have the most showcase of what does it look like when they play against the next level of talent.
Yeah, I agree. Chris, what are your thoughts as far as Ace Bailey and what may be holding him back potentially from hitting that high ceiling? So, what skills are we looking for him to develop this season at Rutgers?
Yeah, Bailey's the guy I'm probably most excited to watch at the college level this year, just to see what this looks like against better athletes. I mean, he was so much more talented than everyone he went up against, that he could coast for 75% of the game, lock in for 5 minutes, and suddenly they'd be up by 15. So the talent's enormous, but it's shot selection, it's awareness, it's consistently locking in. The 75% of the game where his team is losing is him screwing around and taking step back 40 footers, or making goofy no look passes. It's that kind of stuff that you just want to see the grow up. One thing we didn't mention with Flag, and it's also true of Bailey, is these two guys particularly are extremely young. I mean, they're going to walk into the NBA as two of the youngest guys, maybe the two youngest guys in the NBA. So they're very, very young. And so you just want to see more of that grow up. I think what holds him back is he has a Kevin Durant or Tracy McGrady shot selection, like as if he's one of those guys already. And if he's making the shots, that's great, but that's a really hard shot that I have to live on. A lot of these mid-range fades, and so if he can shoot at like a elite level, that's great. But trying to bank on that now, I mean, he's got great numbers as of this moment, but against bigger and better defenders, that's going to get harder. And I think his ball handling right this second still needs work. He needs to tighten that up. He's a big dude. So that's not always the easiest thing for someone like that to do. And I mean, I've seen him shoot over triple teams constantly at the high school level, which I have to constantly pause the screen to just look at it for a moment here and there.
And like down the baseline too, like
Right.
18 feet down the baseline.
It's unreal to see. And he'll pull up and hit those shots. But in the NBA, the athletes are bigger, and in college, the athletes are bigger. And I want to see what it looks like at the next level. And is Rutgers the right place? I don't know, but we're about to see it. So I think for him, it's going to just be developing with the fundamentals. He's got all the talent in the world. I just want him to not give me a headache 5 times a quarter. That's honestly where we are. He just has to grow up a little bit.
I think that shot has actually been coined. No, not that guy. That's Rudy Gay. I think that's what that shot was coined as officially. So yeah, Ace specializes in those shots. What I'm looking for at Rutgers is like, how much are they going to put the ball in his hands and let him actually like, let's see if he can beat T-Mac, you know? Like that's obviously like to me like the highest ceiling like outcome, obviously without the back spasms, but the highest ceiling outcome like prime T-Mac, which is obviously a championship level player in my opinion. I don't care that he didn't get out of the first round. That's meaningless. We're looking at the player and I want to see can he be that? I have doubts, but I definitely see that to me as like a man, if everything goes right, that's where he's at. So to me, does Rutgers give him the opportunity to do that type of stuff? Or is it Dylan Harper with the ball, which I like Harper a lot too, but there's maybe other things I'd like to see from him at Rutgers. And we'll get into that later, of course. But does he have the opportunity? And if he does get the opportunity, does he capitalize on it to be kind of that point forward type, really dangerous player where you can justify taking him top 2, 3 and a really, really strong class is looking like?
One last thing that I want to mention is I think you're right about that, James. I also want to have a better feel for his defense by the end of this season. I mean, he just wasn't in a situation in high school where I feel like I have a great handle on it. I mean, he was playing center for McEachern the whole season, and he's not good at that. Like he's not a rim protector right now. I mean, he's got none of those instincts at this point. He's big and athletic, but he's never boxing out. He's never rotating over to block shots. It almost never happens. He gets blocks through sheer athleticism sometimes, but it's not an awareness thing. And so in some of the higher profile games, he was playing at like on the wing, guarding on the perimeter, and he's athletic, surely and athletic enough. But I want to feel like I have a better handle on the defense soon.
Yeah, they have to play Alabama in a tournament this early in this year. I think it's like Thanksgiving weekend-ish. That's going to be a really big question. Like, what does he do? What does he impact? How does he play against Nate Oates' team, high-level players? That's one I've got really circled on the calendar is like, man, Rutgers has just popped up with these two guys on the schedule, but they have a lot of great games, and we're going to get to see a lot of what Ace Bailey can do. But yeah, Chris, like you hit it nail on the head is – what's he going to do? Like, what is the defense? What does it do? Like, does he lock in? Because that is something he's very clearly not done ever. And he hasn't had to. And so the question with these guys is, as the skill level progresses, how much can you lock in? What does he do? I think that's my biggest question is like, what defensively? Is he going to be a guy you're going to have to hide? He shouldn't be physically with what he's doing. But is he a guy teams are going to attack? You would probably not at the collegiate level, but if he doesn't improve on his ability to, like absorb contact in his chest and, not get picked on and all those kinds of things, I think, he may start out being a guy you're going to have to hide somewhere and then let him work his way into it. But I'd like to see that. I think this year is a big developmental year for him because it's such a huge step up and he's going to play a lot of really big games.
Well, and that's a really great point, by the way. He hasn't had to. He has been so good that he has not had to lock in and play the high-level defense. So maybe that's it. Maybe he's just really young and he's so good that it hasn't mattered. So in college, that won't be the case because no one is so capable of that except maybe like freshman Anthony Davis, like Pete, when he was coming in and just wrecking at Kentucky. But he hasn't had to. So that's the development I want to see at the next level.
I think that the discipline is what I'm looking for because he obviously was chasing blocks and stuff, which as a center, sometimes you feel like, oh, I got to go block shots sometimes. And he's not going to be playing center, obviously, anymore. But sometimes you have to realize the center shouldn't always be chasing the block. That's the Hassan Whiteside, right? Like, we don't always want you to chase the block. Sometimes just you being there is the deterrence. And I get it. He's not going to be a center, so to hold him to those standards is a little bit unrealistic. So I am eager to see what he does at Rutgers. Is the discipline to me. Is he disciplined as a defender? Athletically, he's going to have it. I think IQ wise, I don't have all that much issue with his IQ. I think he knows kind of how to read offensive players, in my opinion, like from what I've seen. But I get the concern just because, like you said, he hasn't really had to at a high level yet. So I do get the concern. Chris, what team did you think would be the best fit for Ace Bailey?
I actually went with the Wizards. I think it's interesting to pick a team for him because I'd like to have a team where there are more vets than this because of what we've just been talking about with some of the maturity stuff. And again, maybe it's not maturity, maybe he just hasn't had a try. But for it so far, it seems like it's choicey. It's choices. So I'd like to have more vets than this. But as we previously talked about, the Wizards are starting from scratch this year. There's some remaining vets on the team, but this thing long term is about Sarr and Koulibaly and Carrington, whatever other young guys come along over the next few drafts. While I think all those guys can be good players, I'm not expecting any of them to ever be like a primary scorer for a successful NBA team. Carrington shot a lot in summer league, but I have no confidence that he's going to be like a high level NBA scorer as of this moment. I liked him a lot as a prospect, but we'll see. Hello, Ace Bailey. Let's put him in a spot where he isn't relied on to be the primary defender, some rim protection behind him long term, some shooting around him. There's lots of these guys can shoot on this Wizards young team. I mean, I think the Wizards front office is probably hoping a lot of that talent is already on the roster and will be for a while. I mean, on defense, you have Koulibaly already and Keyshawn George defending bigger wings as prospects. I think Wizards are hoping that's what those guys are. Koulibaly or Carrington chasing scary guards on the perimeter, Sarr manning the paint. On offense, you're hoping Carrington brings punch. Maybe George could complement Kispert as a shooter. Who should hopefully be resigned soon, by the way. He's an expiring. They should bring him back for sure. But if these guys have decent or even average development, you have some good bones to build around, and they'll be picking at the top of the draft for at least the next couple of years, whether or not these guys work out, I think. But they need a big scorer. They need a go-to guy who can get buckets and an elite offensive player, and maybe that's Ace.
Yeah, I think first of all, you stole my pick, and I was hoping to like swoop in and be like, "Oh, the Wizards, that's a cool pick." And then
Alex, you have to pick a different team than me on one of these.
Well, what am I gonna do? I was hoping he'd throw it to me so I could say the Wizards. But yeah, I think that's really the thing is like the Wizards pieces. There's an Ace Bailey sized hole in this Wizards offense. Like I don't really know. I think Sarr, we have talked at length about what Alex Sarr is and what he's going to be. And I think that the question mark, the summer league situation just made that question mark grow and grow. And we really don't know. But to me, when you look at this Wizards roster, you've got a big gap for the number one option. You got some guys who are decent. You got Bub Carrington, who's going to shoot a lot. You've got Alex Sarr, who can develop into something. You've got Koulibaly, who's a little bit of a glue, like a high-level glue guy, kind of the go-between. I think this would be a really good spot for him to end up in and just be able to grow into hopefully that number one. If you use what James said, if you're thinking T-Mac, well, you got some stuff around him that you can hopefully that he turns into that. But you have the opportunity to let him grow. I think the Wizards have a lot of guys this year. Not a problem down the line that I don't want playing with Ace Bailey. And I'd like to clear them out of the way and just focus on what that rebuild looks like. But one guy that I would hope they could retain that I highly doubt would be Brogdon, because I think that's somebody who could really help in his development. So, probably looking to move Poole somewhere down the line and move.
What? No.
Is that who you were talking about?
Yeah.
We didn't understand that was coming.
Right. But, and like Valanciunas is really, really good as like this counterpunch guy who can do the post up thing, and you can work those 4-minute offensive stretches through him. But if I got Ace Bailey, I want the lane as wide open as humanly imaginable. So I think that's a really fun team to watch them develop in general. Like I'm very excited to actually watch the Wizards because they might be a tire fire, but also picking and choosing what the fun parts of the season are going to be really fun. But Chris, you took my pick. I don't know what to say. I'm Wizards with you.
I don't hate the Wizards as a pick there. I consider them. the team I went with was the Trailblazers. I think they kind of, like you said, with the Wizards having Ace Bailey size, so I think the Trailblazers kind of do too. Um, they, I think, are a little more along in the process, which means Ace Bailey won't be counted on so much, I think, at the beginning to be that shot creator. He can kind of grow into that slowly, which is, I think, a more ideal progression for his development. But again, I get the Wizards as a pick because they're going to be starved for offense, whereas the Trailblazers do already have some other pieces. So it's kind of, I think, what you're hoping for in terms of how quickly he develops. I think if he pushes it too quickly, then there is danger. Although you could have said Jordan Poole had all the time in the world, and look how he ended up, right? You never really know what's the best development path there. So y'all could be right that the Wizards are a better development path in terms of seeing if he can be that guy. But that's kind of where my head was at with that pick. I don't need to go too far into it, I don't think, but because it's kind of for similar reasons as y'all.
I like the Blazers pick. I think if I was 15% more confident in Bailey's defense, I'd be there. So maybe halfway through the season when we see Bailey is a competent wing defender or something, then I like that a lot better. I'm worried about the young guys they have already being defensive players, and so it's just like matching them all up on one team. But I like that idea on offense. And in a month when we've started to see a little bit of records, maybe I'll be right there with you.
Yeah, that's I think the slurry of offensive guards that they have, like with Scoot and with Shadon Sharp, and I mean, and with Simons, like there's a lot of defensive questions. Those guys are not big, they're not defenders, and so I think that they have a lot to grow. And I know this is not the podcast where we're going into what questions do you have about the Trailblazers, but like I think they've got a lot of things to decide this year because I think two of those guys stay and one of them probably doesn't, but I don't think there's ever room for all three of those guys. And so they are certainly lacking, especially if Grant gets moved this year. I think they brought in Atia, which is really fun, but they don't have a lot of wing talent. And James, you hit the nail on the head with that one. Is like, man, if you could get Ace Bailey in here, you fill a big gap, whether that ends up being like a dominant defensive player or whatever we see from him, that's probably icing on the cake, but they really need some of that big wing creation stuff that Ace Bailey is definitely bringing to the table.